Okay. Croeso, everybody. Hope you can hear me. I'm Don Farrer, president of the New Welsh Congregation, New York City. Thanks so much for coming. Very special event. I just want to say how important this has been to me. I was horrified about 10 years ago to discover that the congregation wasn't doing Noson Lowens anymore. And one of my favorite memories of from years back is if you remember, you all know, well, some of you know David Morgan, seeing his son, who was like a 12-year-old years ago, doing a magic tricks in the Noson Lawen. I think I was so excited to learn about Noson Lawen. One thing is that it's not a competition. It's just sharing your talents. And I think that's so important. I will be very pretentious here and say that years ago, I went to Oxford University and Professor Terry Eagleton of Wadham College gave a lecture about industrialized societies and how things became specialized. And we couldn't all be performers anymore. And I think this is wonderful that we can be. I'm going to dedicate the Noson Lawen to my dear friend, Paul Davis, who died this year. He was an amazing photographer, and I've asked Cynthia to do her bit after we show the video of Paul's work. I ran into Paul first at a Welsh picnic where we in Strawberry Fields, where we had to fight off the rats who were trying to encroach on our picnic. And I would run into him near the beacon because he did a series of photos, among other things, of music fans. He did a series about Bruce Springsteen fans. Anyway, I think I should just let his photographs speak for themselves. So, Peter, if you could play the video of Paul Davis's work. Thank you, Peter. Now I'll segue to Cynthia. Cynthia.
Thank you, Don. It's kind of appropriate that we show Paul at the beginning there, because as you saw, one of his motifs was joy. He also followed parades around the world. And, you know, we were one of 3 Davises in the Welsh Society. So we kind of stuck together as cousins. And I remember one of his quick-witted quotes was about Wales. As much as he traveled around the world, he said, Wales, the only place that has a body part named as a beer, and that was brains. So I think of him when I see brains now. Anyway, back to Wales. As you know, Wales has many varied dialects, mainly because of the mountains. And I can think of areas, including my own, in the Amman Valley, where there are 5 different names for a bread roll, and within a 10-mile radius. So it makes communication a bit difficult sometimes. But there's also another language in Wales. There's Welsh, which we know is the language of heaven. There's English, and there's Wenglish. And Wenglish makes it a nice introduction into maybe learning Welsh and learning new words in Welsh, and sometimes just putting an O on the end of a Welsh word to make it Welsh. But there's Wenglish. And Wenglish is a language that you can understand and follow, but you're not necessarily ready to speak the language. And I find myself totally blessed that I learned it as my first language, because quite honestly, I look at the grammar books and I am bursting with admiration for anyone that can speak this language. So an American friend of mine once said, when he saw Welsh for the first time, it looks as if someone's been typing in the dark. And it does, when you can look at it objectively. So here's a little poem in Wenglish. I am a little courier and gweithio underground. The raff will never torri when I go up and down. It's bara when I'm hungry and cwrw when I'm dry. It's gwely when I'm tired and nefoedd when I die. And another one. Despite being taught in Welsh, rwy'n deall beth ti'n dweud. I understand what you're saying. And anything you can do, fe allai wneud, I can do too. You see the glorious sunshine, a minnau'n haelwen haf. My glorious sunshine too. You love the summer's lengthy days, a minnau'n caru haf. I love the summer too. And when the winter brings its storms, our byd and crynu gyd, and all the world is shaking, my thanks I give for all I am, mewn dwy iaith o hyd, still in 2 languages. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. That was wonderful. Great insight into the language. Shruti, over to you. I'm not sure quite what you're doing. If you could introduce what you're doing. And Shruti is been such a great part of our community, and she was just ordained as a minister. We were so excited to have her preach last Sunday. Shruti, over to you.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Don. So I'm going to be bringing another Welsh hymn to the mix in true minister fashion. This time around, I'm singing the hymn Dydd yr Arglwydd, the Lord's Day, also known as Heddiw Cododd Christ o'r Bedd. It's sung to the tune of Easter Hymn, Emina Pasg. A cappella. Heddiw cododd Christ o'r bedd, Hallelujah. Awdwr ein dragwydd o leith, Hallelujah. Wedi prannu'r ar y dref, Talodd efein dyled fawr, hallelujah. Ryddion a ddim ni'n ein nawr, hallelujah. Fe ysgod ad y wraig, hallelujah. Ufern ddi a ffen y draig, hallelujah. Fe bwrcasodd Iesu mad, hallelujah. A'i rinwedd o Laberthrad, hallelujah. Deyrnas nefoedd deglini, hallelujah. O môr ddrydau'n braint yn bri, hallelujah. Cawn ar fyr gyfarfod fri, hallelujah. Gyda'r glan ganweddi gli, hallelujah. Lle mae holl angalion nef, hallelujah. Bydd yn moli a lafnef, hallelujah. Thank you.
Shruti, thank you so much. It was gorgeous. Fantastic. Violet, you are going to be on video, but you're now live.
Right.
Are you still going to speak about Hiraeth?
A little bit.
Great. Over to you,
Yes.
Violet.
Okay, so I am just really glad to be back here. I sorry, there's a dog out here. I got I got obsessed with Wales when I was researching my Welsh great grandfather some years ago, and I made 3 visits to Wales, and each time before I went, I studied Welsh and say something in Welsh, and I just completely fell in love with everything Welsh. I was really into it, and then the pandemic came along, and I was online with people speaking Welsh, but somehow I lost my concentration. I even took a course online, a government course, but then I got a job taking care of horses, which is like my childhood dream come true, and horses have taken over everything. And I haven't been able to get to the city as much as I used to. And so I've kind of fallen out of the whole Welsh thing. And then a couple of things happened. One, I attend the Christian Science Church in Woodstock, and we sang a hymn the other day to the tune of Arhyd y Nos, and I was just hit with a wave of Hiraeth for Wales. I just miss the language, I miss the place, and then a few days later, when I go to the city, I carry this bag around with me, this bag that I got at the Eisteddfod, right? So it just says, study Welsh with us, and I was at a horse show in Woodstock, and this man came up to me and said, "What's that bag about?" And he was from Wrexham. He was very young. He got a job as a computer programmer in New York, and we talked for about an hour, and it was just, so I feel like these are signs, right? And of what, I don't exactly know. Right now, I can't afford to go to Wales, but I am just, anyway, I'm glad to be here. So I was going to talk about all that, but it doesn't have a punchline. So I'm just going to read very briefly from the very beginning of a novel that I've been working on that has absolutely nothing to do with Wales. I assure you, it's very short. The novel is called Triangular Lives. Chapter 1, Joe. My friend Garth is 6'2" and built like an ox, but inside he's like a turtle with no shell. I've never seen a guy with such deep wounds who just keeps on going and going. So much has happened to him. Some of it was his own fault. I mean, he's a great guy and he gives and gives, but he doesn't always see what other people really need. If I'm going to tell about Garth, I should start where we met in high school. Junior year, the year my family moved upstate from Queens, and he changed his name. He had a real preppy name. I forget what, Prescott or Roderick or some such. No, it was Marshall. He was listening all the time to the band, and so he named himself after Garth Hudson. Marsh, Garth, the names were so close, it was almost a joke. One time, it must have been 1971, we decided to drive over to Woodstock and look for Big Pink. You probably know that's the house where the band recorded the basement tapes and music from Big Pink. Just some suburban house in a boring little neighborhood like the one I grew up in, but Bob Dylan bought that house and made a recording studio in the basement, and those geniuses did some pretty magical shit there. Late in the afternoon, we found it after driving around on back roads for hours. We'd smoked so much weed, we just sat in the car staring at the house for about 15 minutes. We should knock on the door, I said after a while. Yeah, said Garth. Introduce ourselves. Oh no, I can't tell Garth Hudson I named myself after him. That would be lame. Tell him your old name. No way. Another name. Tell him Jim. I can't lie to Garth Hudson. We sat looking at the house some more. It looked pretty ordinary, except for being pink, which made it glow a little bit with the sun coming at it low the way it was. There was no car in the driveway. I said maybe they were on tour or something. I was getting sleepy when Garth all of a sudden opened the car door and got out. I felt heavy, like I couldn't move at all. He walked around the house to the back and I couldn't see him anymore. I closed my eyes. When he came back and got in the car, he had a cheese grater in his hand, one of the flat kind that you lay across a bowl. The kitchen window was open, he said, and there was a big hole in the screen. I reached through and jimmied the screen up and crawled inside. I left $5 and took this off the counter. Just think, I've got the band's cheese grater. There is even some mozzarella stuck to it. Come on, let's go home and make pizza. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. That resonated certainly for me, Violet. So now Margot Bruton has done a video on her Welsh heritage, which is going to play that. Peter, if you can play that.
Hi, everyone. This is Margot Bruton. Sorry I couldn't be with you, but I'm going to give you a little history of my family. This is the birth certificate of my grandmother, Alwyn Davies, her father, William, and Eliza Davies. And she was born in 1889. This is her husband's birth certificate, Albert Edward Evans. Sarah and Edward were his father, and he was born in 1886. So he was a little younger than his wife. They were married in 1908, and times were bad over there at the time, so they came over to this country eventually and made their home here. This is my grandfather's parents, and they are the Evanses. He is Evan Evans, and she is Sarah Reese Evans. A very, very old picture here. He worked in the coal mines, and in his later years, he was taken care of by his daughter, Maggie Jane Evans, or Margaret, and there he is. That's a little bit about my grandfather's history. This is Mrs. Llewellyn, and Mrs. Llewellyn came into our family's life when my grandmother's parents, Alwyn's parents, Alwyn Davies' parents, were killed in a cart accident with a horse cart. So Mrs. Llewellyn adopted my grandmother, Alwyn, and she had plenty of children already, and this is her in her later years. But when she was young, she had lots of children, as you can tell by this photo. In one go, she had triplets. My grandfather had brothers, and one of those brothers was Emrys Evans, and this is him. He was a music teacher, very proud of that, and loved the arts and promoted them. And here is another picture of him. He came over to visit me in the United States when I was a child and bought me all kinds of painting supplies and had me playing the piano and just wanted me to be an artist. And so I obeyed him. I became an actor. These are Elvira Reese, which is, of course, on my grandmother's side, and her husband, whose name I have forgotten temporarily. And they came to the United States earlier, before my immediate family did, settled in California and made a fortune. As you can tell, they're quite well dressed, and this is them celebrating St. David's Day in California. My grandfather also had a brother who fought in World War II, an older brother, David, and he unfortunately was killed in that war. That is a little bit about my family. I'm not going to keep talking anymore. I'm just going to mention this lady who some of you know. This was my mother. She passed away in 2002 at the age of 90. But that history all brought me back here to you. Nice talking to you. Bye.
Thank you, Margot in absentia. Next, Tom Ely is going to sing a Simon and Garfunkel song. Now, I just want to interpolate here that Simon and Garfunkel were the soundtrack to my earnest teen years when I went to the youth group at Pinner United Free Church in Pinner, North London. There was, of course, my hard rocking side that listened to the Rolling Stones and Johnny Winter, but that's another story. So Tom is going to perform April Come She Will. Thank you.
Hi,
Tom.
everybody. Hi, everybody. So, this actually is my guitar these days. It's called a Martin backpacker guitar, because as you can see, it's very small, but it does have 6 strings and enough frets. The only thing is we did a sound check before starting today, and my guitar does not seem to be audible. So you're going to be stuck just listening to my singing voice. So with apologies, April Come She Will by Paul Simon. April, come she will. The streams are ripe and swelled with rain. May she will stay, resting in my arms again. June, she'll change her tune. The restless walk, she'll prowl the night. Fly, she will fly, and give no warning to her flight. August, die she must. The autumn wind blows chilly and cold. September I'll remember. A love once new has now grown old. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. That brought back many memories. And now my turn. I've written this piece. Last year I read something from a novel I was working on, but this now is true nonfiction. It's called The Welsh Connection, but I think I should have called it Me and Martin Jones. If only I could get the walls to stand up, Martin. My best friend Martin Jones was watching me as I stood in a shallow hollow in the middle of his back garden. I was pushing mud into wall-like peaks and sadly watching those peaks slowly collapse down again. Then what, Donald? Martin inquired, not moving an inch to assist me in my endeavors. Then, I replied, I could move into this mud hut and live here permanently. Martin nodded his head wisely, but he was probably wondering if I'd let his parents in on this new domestic arrangement for them, or whether the planning department at Hillingdon Town Hall might approve of this most irregular change of function for what had once been a decorative goldfish pond. I was 9 years old, and I was a devotee of the book Stig of the Dump. No doubt you've read it. It's the story of a boy who discovers that there's a caveman living in a pit at the end of his garden. Building a mud hut was the closest I could think to get to becoming my hero, Caveman Stig, and living in closest proximity to my best friend, Martin. Martin Jones and I had become best buddies at school thanks to a connection over our Welsh heritage. We both had one parent who was Welsh, my mother, his father. My mother's Welsh credentials were impeccable. She grew up with Welsh as her first language on a farm in the Preseli Hills that was in spitting distance of where they dug up Stonehenge. Martin's dad's Welsh credentials were a little bit more questionable. He didn't actually grow up in Wales. He was from Wiltshire, wherever that is, and his mastery of the Welsh language didn't extend much beyond Nostar, good night. But his name was Jones, and you didn't cast aspersions on a man who'd been a guard for the Queen at Buckingham Palace and who stood as tall as a small giraffe. The Jones were a lot better off than my family, the Farrows. They lived in a detached house. The Farrows were definitely semi-detached. Martin was destined for the famous boarding school, Christ's Hospital, whose alumni included the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Social climber that I was, I knew that I much preferred the Jones domicile to my own humble abode. Mrs. Jones was a housewife and was on hand to furnish me and Martin with bird's eye fish fingers and Heinz baked beans on toast whenever I came over for a play date, which, as you can understand, was very often. My mum worked, so there were no play dates at my house. The Jones family had a TV. They were one of the first families in the neighborhood to get one. I would beg my parents to let me stay late after a play date and catch some of the top TV shows of the time, like Till Death Us Do Part. Now, if you don't know, if you're American, Till Death Us Do Part was the origin of the English origin of All in the Family. Instead of Archie Bunker, it had bigoted Cockney Alf Garnett, who bore an unfortunate resemblance to my father, Fred, who was also from the East End of London. My blissful, there's a government health warning coming up now, I'm afraid. My blissful friendship with Martin was unfortunately short-lived. Nothing was ever said, but I suspect I was banned from Martin's home because one day I coaxed Martin to go to the local newsagents and claimed that he was picking up a packet of Players cigarettes for his dad. The newsagent bought the lie hook, line, and sinker. And then Martin and I scarpered off to the local woods and, like Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, shamefully sampled the forbidden tobacco plant. Unfortunately, there's no disguising the smell of nicotine on a 10-year-old's breath. The memory of my friendship with Martin Jones haunted me for years. after we went our separate ways. In 1997, I organized a reunion in my junior school class with the ulterior motive of seeing Martin again. I organized the reunion with the help of another old school friend, Andrew Taylor. What would it be like to see Martin after all these years? Andrew kept urging me to let Martin know how important my friendship with Martin had been. At the reunion, however, I said nothing to Martin because I sensed that I wasn't on his radar. And to be honest, quite honest, he seemed quite a bore. Now, you might think this is a rather sad end to the story, but it wasn't. My memories, because the reunion renewed my connection with Andrew Taylor, and we became close friends once again. He came to my 50th birthday party in New York and even went with me to Wales to the Swansea International Film Festival to show my short movie, Uncle Simeon's Secret. So though my friendship with Martin Jones may have gone up in smoke, my friendship with Andrew has grown and grown and is still lively and kicking today. Thank you. Now I'm going to segue to James Thomas, who I believe is going to talk to us about Victor Spinetti. And I just want to say, maybe he'll say this, but Victor Spinetti was a great character actor who was in a lot of things, but the thing I remember him most for was he was in all 3 Beatles movies. So over to you, James.
Okay, Don. I just got your message from 11:30 this morning, and Peter, I don't know what you can do with it, if you can find it, but I emailed you an attachment of Victor Spinetti, a photo, and 2 other guys. But maybe you can find it in time at the end. But I've done a number of articles for Ninai, and this is from one of them. Victor Spinetti never did the news in Welsh. Oh no! Ringo is missing! John, Paul, and George can't find him, and the televised concert starring all 4 is minutes away. Paul's grandfather, a very keen old man, had convinced Ringo to leave his bloomin' book and walk about. The nervous TV director can't stifle a conniption fit. Without the Fab Four, his failure looms. The dire result? It'll be the news in Welsh. The movie is A Hard Day's Night, 1964. The 4, of course, are the Beatles, and the director is the Welsh actor Victor Spinetti. Vittorio Giorgio Andrea Spinetti's father, Giuseppe, owned a chip shop in Coombe below Ebbw and Victor was born there 93 years ago on September 2nd, 1929. During World War II, Joe Spinetti was interned on the Isle of Man as an alien, while his Welsh wife, Lily Watson, looked after the family in Coombe. Victor went on to the now Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama in Cardiff and started in professional theatre with small parts such as Navy Seabee in the chorus of a 1953 provincial tour of the American musical South Pacific. A fellow cast member, standing naked and urinating into a sink backstage, introduced himself. Sean Connery. Spinetti's London debut was in the 1958 musical satire Espresso Bongo, starring Paul Scofield, a little before A Man for All Seasons. Spinetti then joined Joan Littlewood's theatre workshop in London, appearing in the 1959 musical Things Ain't What They Used to Be, that reached the West End in 1960. The workshop's epic multimedia musical Oh, 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 A Lovely War opened in London in 1963 and transferred to Broadway in New York in 1964. Spinetti won the Tony Award for Best Featured Actor in a Musical. By then, he had already filmed A Hard Day's Night. During the London run of Lovely War, John Lennon and George Harrison came backstage to convince Spinetti to do their first movie. Harrison insisted, You've got to be at all our films, since me mum won't come to see them. Because she fancies you. Written by Welshman Alan Owen, A Hard Day's Night became his first of 3 Beatles films, along with Help in '65 and Magical Mystery Tour in '67. By 1965, he was well known, but the Beatles didn't believe it until, on the way to the Bahamas while filming Help, a policeman boarded the plane on its refueling stop in New York and asked, "Is there Victor Spinetti on this plane? Your fan club is at the airport." After seeing all the teddy bears their co-star received, the band became card-carrying members of the Victor Spinetti Fan Club of America. In Help, Spinetti plays the villainous Dr. Foot, who tries to steal Ringo's magic Indian ring, blah, 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 after discovering its powerful effect in his lab. With a ring like that, I could, dare I say it, rule the world. Only, as his assistant Algernon, played by Roy Kinnear, says, if he can get a government grant. The television film Magical Mystery Tour shows Spinetti reprising his role from Lovely War. A nonsense-spouting drill sergeant, this time trying to teach the Mystery Tour how to attack a stuffed papier-mâché cow. The Beatles' 1967 Christmas Time recording features him tap dancing with Ringo Starr. In 1968, Spinetti directed and co-wrote In His Own Right, based on John Lennon's first book. He appeared with Richard Burton in The Taming of the Shrew in 1967 and in Under Milkwood in 1972. He claimed his part in Return of the Pink Panther with Peter Sellers was cut because he was funnier than a star. He also voiced the arch-villain Teclis Pete in the 1980s Welsh cartoon Super Ted. Spinetti told his own stories in his 1989 one-man show, A Very Private Diary, repeating them in Private Diary Revisited in 2009. He sang Paul McCartney's Obla Di, Obla Da on the Beatles Complete on ukulele in 2010. And unfortunately, on the 18th of June, 2012, at the age of 82, as Sir Paul said, the man who makes the clouds disappear, Victor Spinetti, died of cancer. He never did get the chance to do the news in Welsh.
Thank you, Jamie. That was very good, and good to be reminded of Victor Spinetti. And also, I think we're all feeling very sad about Robbie Coltrane passing. Oh, I mean, I don't know if you ever saw it, but Cracker, not just Hagrid, but the crime series Cracker was a cracker. It was fantastic. Segue now to Mark. Mark and I have something in common, that we both had one parent who was Welsh. Over to you, Mark.
Right, I should be unmuted now. Yes, you're absolutely right. It was my dad who was Welsh, and he and his parents spoke Welsh. Well, I've got, but I always have my usual disclaimer here. I mean, I can speak a bit of Welsh that I picked up from going to Wales when I was a kid and meeting Welsh relatives. But it is it's obviously not my first language, so I have a little disclaimer if my pronunciation goes a bit wobbly at any stage, or I get it wrong. But I love singing in Welsh, and I particularly love singing this song. You probably see on the programme. This song's called Yma o Hyd, written by Dafydd Iwan, and if you've been following the success of the Welsh football team over the last few years, this song is the real favourite of the Welsh fans. A Walgoch, the red wall of Welsh fans. It's kind of a protest song. The first verse is really about ancient history. Really, it's about the birth of the Welsh nation at the time of the breakup of the Roman Empire, and it's that time where kind of historical fact gets mixed up with Welsh legends and fictions. But the whole theme of the song is, 1600 years, but the language and the culture has survived in spite of all of the setbacks. There've been a few triumphs, but lots of setbacks, lots of disappointments. And anyone who's followed the Welsh football team over the years would have felt the same thing. So it's a kind of analogy for that, which is maybe why it's popular. It's got a great chorus, which you might even want to sing if you can follow it. It's Running am o hyd, we're still here. Running am o hyd. Gwaitha pawb a popeth, in spite of everyone and everything. Running am o hyd, we're still here. So here we go. Doedd man cofio Maxen, does neb yn y bafod o, mae 1600 o flynyddoedd yn amser I hir co, pan wnaeth Magnus Maximus I Gymro yn y flwyddyn 383 yn gadael y genedl y gyfan, a heddiw welyn ni rynyn yma o hyd, rynyn yma o hyd. Gwaitha pawb a popeth, gwaitha pawb a popeth, Graitha pawb a popeth rynyn yma o hyd. Chwythed y gwynt o'r dwyrain, rhied y storm o'r môr, hollted y mellt yr wybren, a gwaed y daren yn cor. At llifed dy greu gwan galon, at lifed a taiog a llawer, died i'r fagdon o'r campas, rynni'n barod am dariad y waw. Rynni yma o hyd, rynni'n yma o hyd, gwaitha pawb a popeth, gwaitha pawb a popeth, gwaitha pawb a popeth, rynni'n yma o hyd. Cofion y ddacsen wledig, a dael ein gwlad yn un darn, bloeddion gebron o gwledau, bydyw yma tan fydd y farn, gwaitha pob dic Sion Dafed, gwaitha renfagu ac rhyw, byddwn yma i'r ddiwedd amser, bydd ar iaith Gymraeg ar fyw, rynni'n yma o hyd, rynni'n yma o hyd. Gwaitha pawb a popeth, gwaitha pawb a popeth, gwaitha pawb a popeth, rynni'n yma o hyd, rynni'n yma o hyd. Gwaitha pawb a popeth, gwaitha pawb a popeth, gwaitha pawb a popeth, rynni'n yma o hyd. Wow, thanks folks. Marvellous song. What we've got on our programme here, I'm going to do an original song. Now this song, it was inspired really by the first time I ever remember going to Wales, and obviously it wasn't the first time I'd been to Wales, but the first time I actually remembered it. And what happened was we had a car. You know, I don't ever remember a time where we didn't have a car, but I think my dad probably didn't fancy that he would make our car would make the journey. This was in the days before the M4. So my father paid for us to got us tickets to travel on the train, and it was a steam train. So obviously I was quite young. It was the Red Dragon Express, which still runs from Paddington to Fishguard, but it was hauled by a locomotive called the Evening Star. And it was a very famous locomotive. It set lots of speed records, probably second only to the Flying Scotsman. And I just remember coming to Paddington Station and seeing that locomotive and the enormous power of it and just that huge impression it made on me. And just remembering that journey. And we actually travelled first class, you see, and had a nice breakfast and everything on the train. One of the few times in my life I've ever travelled first class on a train. And it was wonderful. And getting to Wales, it was like going from black and white in London to like Technicolor. What I think is weird is that whenever you see pictures of Wales, particularly the valleys, they're always in black and white. But in fact, it's colourful, you know, and compared to dreary old kind of post-war London. And we went out, my grandfather said, right, get up early in the morning and we'll go up to the farm and feed the animals. So my granddad had this little farm, you know, we went up there, and it was very early, and I could see like the sun rising and the moon was still in the sky and a very bright star. I said, Grandpa, what's that star? And he said, it's the evening star. I said, oh. And then the following morning, we got up early and went back up to the farm. And I said, look, I said, it's the evening star. And Grandpa said, no, it's the morning star. And he said, but you told me it was the evening star. I said, no, it's the same star. He said, but it's got another name. It's called Venus. I said, oh, what's Venus? He said, well, Venus is the goddess of love. And he said, and there's three things. He says, there's faith, hope, and love. But the greatest is love, which I think is a line from the Bible. And I've stuck with me all my life, you know, because I'm not a religious person, but I'm kind of, I suppose, a spiritual person. And all of us kind of have a guiding light or a guiding star, or maybe we think there's light at the end of the tunnel if we're religious, and no train metaphor. But, you know, that star will still be there long after we've all gone. And that's kind of reassuring in a way. And it's just a kind of symbol for me of happy times and happy memories of Wales. And of course, my grandparents and my parents who were long gone. So it's called Evening Star. It's just really about the way that when you look back, and let's face it, when you're our age, you've got a lot more life behind you than you have ahead of you. And you look back at it, and it's like how looking back at the past is like looking through a kaleidoscope, and it's all a bit fragmented. But anyway, here it is. It's got a little intro because it started out as an instrumental. Trains used to stop here, but they don't pass by no more. At nights I would lie awake to hear those mighty engines roar. And somewhere in the distance you could hear a whistle whine. But that was long ago, those were different times. It's no use pretending what's gone you can't regain. The sweet sound of a songbird or the rattle of a train. I'm somewhere in a frozen land between wakefulness and sleep. I think about what we've lost and it makes me want to weep. You can write me a letter, but don't email me, don't text. We might not meet again in this world or the next. So won't you tell me, sad-eyed Sarah, how did your showboat sink? You know, if I could turn back time, I would surely fix that link. If I could change the past, I'd rearrange your life. Hate to see you suffering, you know it hurts me like a knife. You can write me a letter saying exactly where you are, but I'll be bound to glory on the evening star, riding on the evening star, all aboard the evening star. Get your tickets for the evening star, check your luggage for the evening star.